The Life and Crimes of Scrooge McDuck. Season 3, Episode 21 of DuckTales, the 2017 reboot, brings to head a lot of factors. A lot of Nemesis like character storylines kind of come to an end within this episode. And considering it's the second to last episode of the entire series, I mean, yeah, I guess this would be the one to do that in. Which means that the last episode is going to be packed to the brim with content. But we open up with basically an infestation on the of these things called what was it, Gribbles, which I think is a parody of Tribbles from Star Trek or something like that. But I mean, Gribbles, Tribbles, yeah, that sounds about right. Basically, furry balls with teeth. You don't want to get too close to these things. And apparently, they were actually brought in by Scrooge to be a pet for Louis so that he could learn some responsibility, but of course he didn't. And they're basically causing mayhem and panic and terror, of course, as you do. But this is interrupted when Scrooge receives a summons to this weird court. And it's karmic court, which is a court that balances the scales of your deeds and misdeeds and weighs them within your life and basically hands over whatever the person who put in the request to the karmic court asks in return as like recompense for all that you've done wrong to the accuser. And apparently, Scrooge has been summoned here to be judged within the entirety of his life, and has been put together by none other than Doofus Drake, who comes in full on Hannibal style. Like, geez, what a drama queen. But this is actually in response and revenge for the misdeeds of Louis, Llewellyn Duck, as he puts it, because of Louis, Doofus Drake ended up having to share and split up the inheritance that he got from his me mama amongst his family. And so he's going after Louis's potential inheritance as a way of getting back at him. But Scrooge feels that he didn't take any of his money through misdeeds or underhanded means. Everything he earned was earned square, as he puts it. He earned his money square. That's his whole thing. But in comes Glomgold as the first witness. And it's portrayed as like, oh, Glomgold was just a simple entrepreneur trying to make his way in the world. That is until, Scrooge McDuck came into his life. And ultimately, while we pinpoint the specific moment in which Scrooge had kind of undermined Glomgold's attempt to get this ancient gem, like what was it, the Shark God's gem or something like that, and Glomgold was retrieving it to bring it to Duckburg to really make himself look pretty good. But in came Scrooge McDuck, not wanting to be hustled in on the treasure hunting business and all that. But as events start to get underway, Glomgold starts to get irrational, the reporter gets knocked off of the edge, and Glomgold refuses to help her because of his paranoia and thinking that, oh, you're in league with Scrooge, of course you must be. But he ends up setting off all the traps within the cave and almost gets himself eaten, and basically shows on live TV that he is no hero. He's a coward and an imbecile. And as the reporter and her cameraman are almost eaten, in comes Scrooge with the gem that he managed to successfully retrieve. And the reporter kind of sees Scrooge as more of a hero. In the face of overwhelming danger, he chose to do the right thing and help people, and he still managed to get the gem as well, proving that Glomgold, nothing special. And they basically just leave Glomgold there. It's just like, he'll work his way out. But Glomgold apparently became friends with the shark and gained a bond with them and all that. But You know, ultimately, Scrooge sees no problem with all of this. He ultimately shouldn't be blamed for everything that Glomgold has done. You know, he got that ruby fair and square, and he doesn't feel the reason need to be in this court. But the bailiff shuts him up pretty handedly because he keeps mouthing off. But Louis, with his sly talking self, knows that he's got this on lock, ultimately saying that look, Glomgold is the architect of his own destruction. Hell, he's planting dynamite under Scrooge's seat as we speak, which, of course, as all things, blows up right in his face. You know, ultimately, Glomgold, or Duke Baloney, was always this conniving, scheming weasel, and he would have been that way, Scrooge or no Scrooge. So ultimately, Glomgold's whole life is put in the innocent category. And, Louis kind of wonders, it's just like, okay, I think we might have this. We might have this on lock. But in comes the next person, Ma Beagle, and we get to see something that I've been waiting to see for the longest time, since season one, since we learned about how Scrooge managed to take back Duckburg, because this was supposed to be Fort Duckburg. Donald's long distant ancestor founded this place, but it was taken over by the Beagles, and in came Scrooge looking to buy the place back. But Pa Beagle, well, Grandpa Beagle, I guess it would be, uh, Pappy Beagle. There we go. Pappy Beagle. Ma Beagle's grandpa. And we even get to see a young Ma Beagle, which is so weird to see Ma Beagle so young. But, Pappy Beagle only agreed to take Scrooge's payment if he could beat him at arm wrestling. If he loses, they take the money and Scrooge gets. But if he wins, Scrooge gets the town free of charge. And so the arm wrestling match is underway, but Scrooge is really struggling against Pappy Beagle. But then he notices a crack within the box that they're arm wrestling on, and notices a small Beagle boy using a winch that is attached to Pa Beagle's own wrists. And so he slides some coins into the box. The Beagle tries to grab it, and Scrooge uses this opportunity to just BAM! Take down Pappy Beagle, which reveals the little Beagle who was helping out Pappy. And all the other Beagles are just like, Pappy was cheating the entire time. Here we thought you were something else, Pappy, but you were nothing but a fake and a phony. So Scrooge gets the deed to the town, keeps his money, and just walks off because it's just like, yep, and there we go. That's how you do it. But ultimately, Doofus makes the case that, Ma Beagle really looked up to her Pappy. And because of Scrooge's actions and being so callous in the way that he did things, it sent Ma Beagle down this life of crime. So she's put in the guilty category. But Scrooge says that, yeah, I guess I could have been a little bit nicer to Ma Beagle when she was younger, but does that really account for everything that she did in her life? But Louis is unconvinced and asks them to keep playing that memory because he feels that he recognizes a charlatan when he sees one. And as it turns out, Ma Beagle uses this downfall of Pappy Beagle has an opportunity to take over the entire Beagle community. It wasn't that she fell into criminal activity. No, she rose to the occasion of criminal activity, which probably would have happened one way or another. Louis feels that ultimately Ma Beagle is responsible for her own actions, and Scrooge had no part in it. So she's put in the innocent category. But the next person is none other than Magica the Spell, and Scrooge starts sweating this a little bit as we get to see the background of Magica the Spell and the first day that she met Scrooge McDuck, which, honestly, I never really questioned that. Magical showdown, he sealed her within his number one dime, bada bing, bada boom, bada bam. That was it. But seeing this is very interesting. And we come to actually meet Magica's brother, Dispel. And Dispel is a very interesting character because he was introduced in the 87 version of DuckTales, but we never really got to see him in his human form. Now, Magica, really reckless with her magic, which is something that is very true in all incarnations of Magica. She uses her magic very willy nilly, turning people into pigs and goats and stuff like that. Just doing it back and forth. But Poe kind of tempers that a little bit, keeps her kind of in line to at least to a certain degree. But Louis just like, okay, so it just proves that Magica was always evil. But apparently, things only escalated because of Scrooge, as over time, the townspeople stopped showing up, which, well, of course, she probably turned them all into goats, which we find out is true later on. But Magica and Poe wanted more wealth, more money. They were basically hoarding dragons at this point. So they used a spell to summon the shadow creatures to bring them more wealth. One of these bits of wealth was actually Scrooge's dime, which they mock. It's just like, this miser holding on to this one dime. But Scrooge is just like, look, ultimately, well, I earned that dime. Of course I want this dime. Unlike you who uses your power to steal left and right, you've never earned anything a day in your life. And he actually tries to goad them into, hey, if I manage to defeat you in unarmed combat, you give me all of your wealth. And so Magica kind of is goaded into this, and Poe tries to talk her out of it, knowing that it's ultimately just a trick. He knows Scrooge's number and knows what he's up to. But Scrooge says, so ultimately it's your brother who's the one in control. You're always going to be held back by your family. And Magica takes this as the ultimate insult, steals Poe's magical amulet, and tries to go after Scrooge, which just goes to show that they were always going to be two people who clashed a lot. But honestly, this really does lie in line with Magica's personality. Always stubborn, quick to temper, always going on the offensive, but Scrooge manages to deflect Magica's blast with his dime, but Poe takes the shot himself, being turned into a raven, which is actually what happened in the original 87 series. Not that it happened this way, but Poe was turned into a raven, and Magica, in certain instances, wanted Scrooge's number one dime in order to turn Poe back. But Magica here, she's unable to turn Poe back because she never really learned that ability. And it's only through having his amulet that Poe would be able to turn himself back. But then he starts to fly away, and Magica begs Scrooge to grab Poe so that she doesn't lose her brother. But Scrooge is busy just gathering up what wealth he can carry. And as Poe flies away, Magica blames him for everything that has happened, for the loss of her brother. But Scrooge ultimately says, well, aren't you the all-powerful witch? Yeah, well, that's just what you get with tangling with Scrooge McDuck. And he just walks off as Magica takes her and her brother's two amulets and combines them into the staff that we know. But ultimately it was too little too late. She had lost track of Poe, and any effort she could make in turning him back, can't really be done if she can't find him. So ultimately, Doofus says that because of this, because of Scrooge's actions, that made Magica even more of a dangerous villain. And it just goes to show how callous a person Scrooge could be. And Louis is kind of taken aback by that, even questioning if he gave any of the treasure to the townspeople. But Scrooge says, look, ultimately they were all goats by that point. So I bought a farm, put them on the farm, and sold their milk. So, Louis at a loss. It's just like, yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah, Magica is a bad person, but you kind of did a really dirty thing right there by just leaving her brother to his fate. And Scrooge ultimately realizes just like maybe that's it. Maybe I've just perpetuated having these enemies for so long. I've lived a long life. Of course I have enemies, and I thought that was just natural. Never really dawned on me to actually do anything for these people. So Louis takes the time to do something that Scrooge never really did back all that time back. And he empathizes with Doofus and apologizes and says he's sorry for everything that's happened. And Doofus accepts this. He thanks Louis and he just walks off. Like, ultimately, I guess that's all he really wanted, an apology. He didn't want the money back, he just wanted Louis to be a little bit sorry for what he did to some capacity. And with this, I guess it's water under the bridge. And Scrooge is very proud of Louis for what he did, for making things square even with someone who would be a nemesis to him. So Scrooge does the same, apologizing for everything that he did, for not helping out more, for perpetuating this cycle of hatred and violence. And of course, Magica doesn't accept this apology, but all three of them are put into the guilt category, with it being declared that ultimately, because of Scrooge's admission of guilt, Magica will receive his number one dime, Mob Eagle will receive the deed to Duckburg, and Glomgold will receive all of his wealth, much to the delight of all three of the villains. But ultimately, Louis realizes something when Glomgold says that, he's the maker of Scrooge's destruction. And he's just like, wait, but if Scrooge created all three of them, they also helped to create Scrooge. They were the ones who helped make him grow, helped to mold him into a better person, a more tactical person. If anything, they were the stepping stones that helped to make Scrooge into the person that he is today. Something that Justice does agree with. And so, with all of that, yeah, it's declared that Scrooge will receive all of his stuff right on back. And Scrooge is so pleased with Louis. He's just like, way to go, Louis. You really thought that one through. You did the hard work. You learned the lesson and you learned to take responsibility. Something that Scrooge is overjoyed by. And he learned to take a little responsibility himself. Although Louis passes on the responsibility of all the gribbles, or whatever they're called, as ultimately Scrooge should have known better in actually giving Louis such a dangerous pet. And thus ends our episode. Very fascinating to see all of that. Honestly, Magica's backstory is probably the saddest out of everything. To have her have lost her brother that way, like, that was kind of cold-blooded, Scrooge. It's not like it didn't deserve it to some degree, but she could have helped out at least a little. And hell, maybe they could have turned all the townspeople back as well. They could have found a way around that. Like, it was a cold one on Scrooge's part. But everything else, yeah, no. Mob Eagle was always gonna be bad, and Duke Baloney was always gonna be bad. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Who had the most interesting backstory and the best gripe against Scrooge? Or do you ultimately feel that all of what Scrooge did was justified and he shouldn't have had to apologize for any of it? Tell me your thoughts and more in the comment section below. If you liked the video, like it. If you didn't, dislike it, whatever. Subscribe, bell, all that good stuff. And until the next video, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.